That's better. Thank you. I found my voice. Uh, and it's good to be with all of you on this very blowy March evening. So I think a number of you, probably maybe most of you, I hope, had the opportunity to attend Hongo Brooks's Shuso Hosen ceremony, and he spoke about a koan that I thought was very appropriate to the times we're living in now. And as you may recall, or if you don't recall, if you weren't there, I'll fill you in. He talked about the famous story of Bodhidharma and Emperor Wu, where a nation of that encounter, Emperor Wu draws himself up, says, "Who are you?" And Bodhidharma says, "I don't know." And he walks away. And so the theme of Hongo's talk was this I don't know, not knowing. And well, I don't know about you, but speaking for myself, these past few years have shaken up so many of the assumptions that I had about the way the world works and this country works. I never expected to have to confront an epidemic like we've been confronting. Never expected to have to contemplate that democracy in this country might vanish in my lifetime. It's a possibility, certainly. And of course, we're once again faced with a question that we thought was settled, the balance of power in Europe. The cause of two great world conflagrations, and it's reared its head again. So I felt that I wanted to talk a little about this not knowing, and I thought a good place to start is actually my favorite part of the koan, which is after Bodhidharma says, "I don't know," and walks away, the emperor's advisor turns to him and says, "Hey, you know who that was?" And the emperor goes, "I don't know." Another, "I don't know." Maybe quite different from Bodhidharma's. And the advisor says, "Well, that was the incarnation of the great Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion." And when the emperor heard this, he was very sorry. And he sent his men to go and bring Bodhidharma back. And the advisor said, "No, you don't bother with that. You could send everyone in China after him." And still, he wouldn't return. So we can see the very grabby quality of the emperor's approach to Buddhism. Oh, he had the truth. Let's go bring him back. Let's go get the truth. And I think we can all relate to this huffing and puffing after truth. You know, we were all there when we started our practice. Where is enlightenment? What is the truth? What am I going to get out of this practice? Is this going to make my life better? Am I going to be happier? Well, how do I do it? How do I do it? Who can tell me how to do it? Where can I find it? So I think we can all identify with Emperor Wu, just as we can identify uh, with that monastery full of monks who ran after the sixth ancestor after he got the Dharma transmission and tried to grab him, get those robe and bowls of the Dharma transmission back. When, of course, they were receiving the Dharma transmission at every moment, every single moment. And yet somehow they couldn't appreciate the fact. So all of us are receiving the Dharma transmission at this very moment. What keeps us from fully appreciating that fact? Dogen Zenji says it very clearly. He says, the great way circulates everywhere, at all times and all places. How could practice and enlightenment, even for a moment, be necessary? And yet he says, if you miss the mark by a single hair, you are as far away from it as heaven is from earth. So what is this missing the mark? How did the emperor miss the mark? How did the monks who ran after the sixth ancestor miss the mark? Well, it's really pretty simple. We miss the mark when we try to use our discriminating thinking mind for a purpose for which it is not intended. To grasp the Buddha Dharma, to arrive at some conclusion about it. It can be some kind of intellectual understanding, or it can be some kind of special experience that you have it and the matter is completely settled for you once and for all. We can visualize it in any number of ways. But the truth is, as long as our discriminating mind is running after the Dharma, is running after the truth, it's going to feel separate from the truth, separate from our life. So what is this great way that circulates everywhere? Why is it that ultimately there is nothing to know, nothing to grasp? Well, you know, if we think about it, actually, in a way, it's very easy. You know, on an October morning in 1953, I was born. And guess what? I knew exactly how to do it with a little help from others. Happened without any figuring, without any intellectual understanding. And when I became a little child, I knew how to live the life of a child. When I became an arrogant, snotty adolescent, it happened without a lot of figuring on my part. And of course, my life has not been remarkable in any way, and it's been very individual. And yet somehow each stage of life arrived in the most natural way possible. And I find now, you know, it's quite without effort that I'm able to be a fuddled old man. I don't know how that happened, but it came quite naturally. Just as the sun, the moon, and the stars, they shine without a lot of figuring. Is this knowing or not knowing? When it's hot in the summer, we sweat. Do we figure out how to sweat? Uh, Dogen Zenji calls this continuous practice or ceaseless practice that's going on at every single moment. It's the practice of all beings and all things arising just as they are in this moment without a lot of fuss, without a lot of figuring, without a lot of discrimination. The ceaseless practice of the sun, moon, and the stars. The ceaseless practice of ourselves as human beings in the world and as practitioners of the Buddha Dharma, which is not different than the practice of the sun, moon, and stars, all arising in this moment. And of course, our discriminating mind goes, okay, then the key to this whole thing is to stop thinking and discriminating. But of course, we find the answer to that when we spend even 5 minutes on our cushions. And we notice that the discriminating mind itself functions freely, quite without any effort on our part. The thoughts come from we know not where. They hang around for a short time or a longer time, and then they depart for we know not where. They are also part of this ceaseless practice. What there isn't is a permanent self that is thinking these thoughts. There is only the ceaseless practice in the circle of the way that we actualize and manifest in each moment of our lives, consciously or unconsciously. Dogen doesn't put any big premium on being conscious of it. He says, you won't be aware most of the time that you're part of this great circle of ceaseless practice, that you are, in fact, nothing other than this great ceaseless practice. Because when experienced, it doesn't seem to be anything remarkable. My heart knows how to beat. My hair knows how to grow. All of these things are practicing right now. And though, of course, I, struggled over this Dharma talk as I do over all of them, that struggling was the completely free actualization of this ceaseless practice. Our struggles in the Dharma and our struggles in life are the complete actualization of this ceaseless practice, which is the Buddha Dharma. So our mistake, Dogen says, is doing what he did. Thinking, oh, well, there's something I have to get over in China or over in Japan, over at the Village Zendo for that matter. And I'll figure out what that is and then I'll have it. All that's necessary is to practice in the now of this moment wholeheartedly without expectation, practicing with all beings, although it doesn't feel remarkable, practicing with the whole universe, although it doesn't feel remarkable. Dogen says, to go off here and there looking for this continuous practice appears similar to the aspiration for it. So those monks trying to chase it down when they were after the sixth ancestor, Emperor Wu, wanting to send his whole kingdom after Bodhidharma, it looks very sincere, but actually true aspiration is the aspiration of right now, not the aspiration for something that's going to happen at some time in the future. Dogen says between aspiration, practice, enlightenment, and nirvana, there is not even the slightest gap. It is all actualized right now. And it's not actualized in China or Japan or at the Village Zendo. It's actualized right here. And right now and right here will be totally changed in the next moment. And it will need to be actualized again and again and again and again. This is the authentic expression of our lives. There's no place of arrival. There is simply this unbounded creativity, which is our gift, our birthright. If only we are willing to open ourselves to it. There was a monk named Fa Yan who became a very great teacher. And he's a figure that we find a lot in Zen literature as a know-it-all. He was from the upper classes, very well educated, very sincere. He studied years with a master of the Vinaya, the priestly precepts of those times. He studied with great master chanting and Zen. Learned a great deal about the Dharma, and yet grew very frustrated. And finally, he just set out on a pilgrimage with some fellow monks, trudging through the mountains. And on Mount Dizang, they ran into a very heavy snowstorm. And fortunately, the monastery of Master Dizang was nearby, and they took shelter there. And the next day, after the snowstorm had stopped, Master Dizang asked Fa Yan, "Where are you going?" And Fa Yan said, "I'm going off on my pilgrimage." And Fa Yan said, "What is the purpose of pilgrimage?" And Fa Yan said, "I don't know." And Dizang said, "Not knowing is most intimate. In the same way, my heart doesn't know how to beat. In the same way, my hair doesn't know how to grow. In the same way, I don't know how to teach the Buddha Dharma. And yet, here I am, doing what I can in this moment, as wholeheartedly as I can possibly do it." Intimacy. Enkyo Roshi felt that this concept was so important, she made it the title of one of her books, Most Intimate, Most Intimate. Throwing ourselves wholeheartedly into here, wholeheartedly into now, wholeheartedly into the ceaseless practice of all beings, all things, being one note in the symphony of ceaseless practice. And in being that one note, actualizing the entire practice, just as much as the sun actualizes it, or as a blade of grass. I'll conclude with another story about Fayan, who, though he started out as a very intellectual type of student, became a very straightforward kind of teacher. And there was a lot of talk in the monastery about a hermit who was living off on the mountain somewhere. And the hermit, in his hut, above the window, he wrote the word mind. Above the door, he wrote the word mind. Above the wall in front of the hut, he wrote the word mind. And the monks in the monastery were very impressed by this. And Fayan said, "Oh, I'm not that way. If it were me, above the window, I would have written the word window. Above the door, I would have written the word door. And above the wall, I would have written the word wall." So he brings up the other side. The hermit brings up all dharmas are one mind. Fayan brings up one mind is all dharmas. So how do we actualize this without falling into that kind of dichotomy? Well, at the right time, we need to throw open the window. At the right time, we need to swing the door wide open. And as Walt Whitman said, take the damn door off its hinges. And at the right time, we need to tear the wall down. At the right time, we need to open our hearts and open our minds and realize that we are the ceaseless practice of this very time and place.